Good morning. My name is Elianne Ramos, and I'll be your host. Today's show is organized in partnership with the organization Political Parity, and this is the continuation of previous conversations that I've had before with notable Latinas in politics. Despite having made many strides, and despite there being a record number of women currently serving in office, Latinas still make up only about 1 to 2% of elected officials at every level of government, local, state, and national. In fact, only one Latina has ever served as governor, and no Latina has ever served in the U.S. Senate. So this morning, I'll be talking about Latinas' growing political power, or lack thereof, and our prospects in today's politics and beyond. And I have as my guests two amazing Latinas who are really breaking the mold and forging their own path in the world of politics. But before I introduce them, I'd love for you to please engage in this conversation on Twitter using the hashtag LatinasRepresent. So now let me introduce my amazing expert guests today. First up, we have Julissa Ferreras, who is a council member to the 21st District in Queens, New York. She's also the first Latina elected to political office in Queens. And she also runs the budget for the largest city in the country, or New York City. Welcome to the show, Julissa.
Thank you. Gracias.
And my other guest is Jessica González-Rojas, my very good friend, and she's the executive director at the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health. She's also a former Democratic State Committee member in New York State. How are you, Jessica?
Great, happy to be here.
Good to have you. Good to have you here. So I'm going to start with you both have had these amazing careers where you have been able to break different barriers in order to get to like the very top of the political spectrum. So can we start with maybe you sharing part of that story, part of your journey into politics? Either one of you can start.
Jessica, you want to go first?
No, go ahead,
Okay. So, hello everyone, and thank you again for this wonderful opportunity. Such an honor to be with you. So my start into politics was very much like the start of many women in politics. You never think you're actually going to be in politics. I was running a nonprofit organization as a director of a youth program or an after-school program, and I found that in my district, the elected officials weren't investing as they should. So I began to meet with elected officials and look for funding and so on and so forth. And then I realized that the higher up I went, or even in this case, there were no Latinos elected officials, yet the constituency was predominantly Latino. And I got involved by supporting a Latino candidate who was running for office. I became his chief of staff. And then he moved on, but I had to be asked several times to run for office. And I only got the gumption to do it when I saw the candidates that were running, and Jessica knows this because she's from the district. When I saw that all the candidates were running were men, and I said, oh my God, I could totally do this much better than they will. And then I started raising money and making sure that my passions were out there. But what we have found, and studies have proven, that oftentimes women have to be asked up to 7 times before they run for office before they finally say yes. So there's a lot of barriers that we have to overcome, but I hope that I am a symbol of it's totally possible, and nobody can do it better than us.
Very good. Oh my goodness, and I can totally understand. This has been the case with a lot of the women that I have interviewed before. So it seems to be like a pattern, right? Jessica, what has been your experience?
Well, actually, Julissa and I kind of came to politics at the same time. It was post 2000 census. It was 2001, 2002, and there was an open district in our community where we live in Queens. And there was a lot of attention around this being a Latino district because the community is so incredibly diverse. We have a strong, vibrant immigrant community in Queens. And this was sort of an opportunity for a lot of people to run. And as Julissa mentioned, all the candidates were men. And in fact, I remember with one race in particular, it ended up being, the Colombian man versus the Dominican man versus the Ecuadorian man, and then there was a white guy in the race, and actually he ended up winning that race because there was sort of some internal Latino political challenges that were coming up and dynamics, which he was a very fine representative, but obviously for a community that's very immigrant, very Latino, it's really critical to have ourselves and see ourselves reflected in the leadership. So I was also have a similar story. I was volunteering and on the board of a nonprofit organization called New Immigrant Community Empowerment. And I was involved in the organization in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I was really doing a lot of work around integration into the census and making sure that our communities be counted. And again, as I became very politicized with that process, and wanted to ensure that our community was counted in the census, and that immigrants knew that the more that they participate in the census and other civic opportunities, the more resources can get into the community, more of their voices could be heard at levels of politics. And I felt really connected to that, and I feel really connected to community. And again, I was also approached and asked to run for a political office. It's a very small position, but it was an opportunity to, dip my toe in the water, and it was a Democratic State Committee member. And it was a really amazing experience because I knocked on doors. I was out every single night. Julissa and I, crisscrossed the community to ensure that we were being good candidates, right? Hearing from the community, talking about the issues, raising our profile, and really listening. But also there was a commitment just to have people really get involved. And it was such a historic election that it was so incredibly exciting to be part of. So I feel sort of part of a little bit of history in that community. And it was really, truly an honor and an incredible experience to run. And
wow. We definitely need more women like you who have, like Lisa was saying, who have the gumption, who actually take the jump right into the world of politics. Like I was mentioning in the beginning, the numbers for women at every level of government are truly appalling. So, to you guys, what does that say about the state of women in politics? Are we making any progress?
I think that, obviously there are examples of great success. But our biggest issue right now is our pipeline. Mm-hmm. We are often judged by the numbers in Congress and the numbers in the U.S. Senate. But if women don't run for office in district leader positions and council members and state assembly members, then we're not developing the trajectory necessary to run for a congressional seat and a U.S. senator. So that is what worries me more, that there aren't enough of the larger institutions that usually help candidates run for higher office, seeing successful examples of that. And I always feel that the number one challenge for women running for office is raising money. And, we're often taught, especially as Latinas, do not be this. You don't ask. Yeah. And even, when you're in crisis, you definitely don't ask. So how do we begin to break apart and take that misnomer of, that we're begging? We're not begging. This is part of the process. And I think the more that we're able to empower women in that way and support women in that way, we will see more women run for office. And, one of the challenges that I had to overcome was that I was very focused in my career, and it's like the thing that oftentimes we don't talk about, but I got married late. I just had my son at 36, and those were decisions that I made, but I want women to know that you can have it all. You can do it. I have a 2-year-old. I just voted on a budget for almost $80 billion, and, and I got married, and, there is happiness. But I think oftentimes women think that they have to give up one for the other. And it's really not about giving it up. It's about kind of just doing it and making it all happen at the same time.
Sí se puede, right?
Sí se puede. And Jessica has a beautiful family also. These are decisions like we have to really understand that you don't have to give up the decision of having a family so that you can have a career.
Yeah. Jessica, how's that been for you?
Yes, I was going to actually add that point that oftentimes, women are the backbones of our communities, particularly Latinas. We're often navigating the educational system, the healthcare system, career, making ends meet. That often the idea of running for office is just not within our sights.
Mhm.
So I think, the stories that both Julissa and I have of being active community members and people sort of seeing the potential in us really kind of spark that opportunity to think bigger, right? Think beyond just serving as a community activist, which is amazing, but actually then being at the helm of political action and being a representative of the community. So I think, sometimes we just don't see ourselves in these opportunities. Jalissa's point about family is a really strong one. I was actually subsequently asked to run for higher office, and I decided not to because of I wanted to have a family and it would require a lot of travel. I'm now in a job that requires tons of travel, and I have also a beautiful son, just 2 years older than Julissa's, and and I made it work. So I always wonder, oh, should I have run for that position? Because you just really you figure it out, right? You make it work somehow. And I think the strong thing about Latinas and Latina communities that it takes a village to raise a family. It takes a village to be part of the community. We are very community and family centered. And often those support networks come out and allow us to do the things we want to do in our career and our community. So, like Julissa said, it's also often asking for money, which is a tremendous challenge, but it's also then asking for help and support when we need it. But I think those rally around us, people in our lives, people in our community, people in our family would rally around us to be able to be successful in this work. And I think Julissa is such an incredible example. I was almost in tears when you passed that budget and you recognized all the working moms that were part of that process. I think that was a really emotional moment and really lifted up the struggle and the sacrifice that working Latinas, women of color, parents, single parents are doing to make this community better. And we just have to believe and know that we can do it. We have to support one another.
No, no, and it's the reality is that the society is changing slowly but surely. It's changing in the attitudes towards women who have a career, obviously. But do you feel that that's changing also in the Latino community? A community that has a reputation for being a little chauvinistic. Do you think that's also happening in our community?
I think that there is always room for growth, and I think the more we have generations like myself and Jessica proving that you can make this happen and work, the more we begin to break down those barriers. Um, I I often find still when I go visit my senior centers, they'll ask me, "Are you spending time with your family?" So it's still very much a part of our value system. But yeah, I come across rooms still where people walk by me, men will say, ask where's the council member who runs the finance division. They're looking for a man. They're looking for a white man. I've been overlooked at events where I have to go give the keynote, and mostly Latino events where I have to go give the keynote, and they're like, "Oh, estamos esperando al concejal." Um, so I live it every day. This weekend, I had an argument with the consul general from Dominican Republic, and he had no idea who I was, and then he quickly found out who I was. But so yeah, I think it's very much alive. But it should not be a reason for us to be discouraged into getting into the conversation, because we also have to take responsibility that we have to be in the room and be there to even have the conversation.
Exactly, exactly. So, Jessica, do you think that are you seeing more Latinas? You who spends so much time around the country, on a plane and going to different places. Are you seeing more Latinas now getting into politics or wanting to run for office?
The work I do every day, I see Latinas leading the community. They are on the front lines of all sorts of struggles. They're on the front lines with their family, fighting for and advocating for their family. They're fighting and advocating for healthcare. These are natural born leaders. And in the work that I do with the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health, we work not to develop leaders, but to elevate them, because we believe all these women are leaders. I think the shift again comes when they move from being a community activist, a community leader, to one considering running for office. And as Julissa mentioned earlier, we have to be often asked 7 times or more to consider running for office. There's almost this waiting for permission thing that happens. But I think with leaders like Julissa, leaders like our make exciting candidates that are running for office now, and some of the leaders that are at the front ends, I think it'll change the face of government, but it's not yet enough. I think we have to fight for the policies to ensure that we can, raise our family, that we have solid health systems, that we have a solid education system, because that will allow us to, free us up to be able to invest the time and resources and dedicate the time to career. So the energy's there, the passion's there, the capabilities there, the brilliance is there. I see it every single day in places like the Rio Grande Valley, that is, a really impoverished community. It has very little resources, but the women and the community is so resilient. I just see these incredible natural born leaders doing the really difficult work day in and day out. So it's about shifting the paradigm and shifting the narrative to understand and see themselves in political office. That is the work that we're trying to do to encourage folks to see themselves in that role.
Now I'm gonna go on to Julissa now, because Julissa, when you were elected back in 2010, 2009, you became the first Latina to be elected in political office in Queens. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you found when you were first running, when you first decided to run for office?
I found challenges that I turned into opportunities, but the number one challenge is that no one, it was kind of, oh, this has never happened. How are you going to do this? There isn't a Latina. But then we quickly, and with the help of Jessica, we quickly changed it into an opportunity. It became, some people saw it as an obstacle, but it became like my flag, okay, we need to get a Latina. How dare we not have a Latina? How could this be possible that in this day and age there isn't a Latina elected? So I owned that narrative. I said, I'm not going to have it be used against me, as some people would refer to and try to say que it wasn't the time yet for a Latina. We still are not ready as a people to elect a Latina. But I kind of flipped it on its head and said, shame on us for not having a Latina yet. And I'm the only one running, so it better be me.
Good for you.
I'll add too, we were both very young. I think we were 25, 26 years old, and I think that's another narrative that, we were not just Latinas from the community, but we were young Latinas. And I think we brought almost a different energy to the kind of political environment in that space. I think there was a lot of excitement because there were barriers that would be broken if we both were elected in our roles. And I think that's another element as well, because, as a young person, we really represent the future. And we really can tell a narrative of what it's like to live in the community, face some of the challenges that our mothers, our tias, our friends, our grandparents, right? We experience all that. We know what it's like to live there, and we know what the needs are. So I think as young people, it was another narrative that we were crafting in terms of the future of the community in Queens.
Nice.
And it's not to say that there were a lot of institutional groups that were not happy with what we were going to represent, because it also meant that they were losing power. So Jessica and I had to immediately start working on, no, we want to come in and work with you, but the reality is that we need a voice at the table. Because what we would get, at least the pushback that I would get was, but aren't we working together already? You know, aren't you happy? Aren't we taking care of you? And it's like, no, it's not the same thing. We need to have women at the table. We need to have Latinos with our experiences at the table. So it's, you know, we created this tension that was often overlooked with the institutions that were already established in our communities.
So you guys you have mentioned all of these different barriers and all of these different things that you have to go through. So can you tell me, is there a way for women to kind of work around that? What would be your recommendations in terms of, you know, how do you work around the racial and the gender inequalities that surround running for office?
Jessica, you should go first.
I think finding support was critical. I think Julissa and I running at the same time was really incredible because to some extent we had each other, but we were very, again, new, you know, I wouldn't say new actually. Julissa was actually in the movement and involved very long time, and I was very involved in the community. But in terms of running for a political position, there's a lot of sort of uncharted territory that no one tells you about. So I think trying to find mentors in the field was really critical. And I think it is challenging in a political environment where there's not tons of trust, right? You don't know who you can trust. As Julissa mentioned, there's like the institutional candidates, those that feel that they've been waiting for the moment and this is their time and not the time for these, you know, young Latinas who are community activists and community leaders, right? So you're sort of challenging that, but yet you still have to find the bridges and the opportunities to build relationships with those folks and leverage their expertise and mentorship, because I think, you know, I wish I had more mentors, and whenever I talk to programs that seek to build Latina candidates, I'm always like, don't forget about the mentors. You know, you could teach someone to raise money, you could teach them to, you know, how to canvass, how to get people out, how to turn out the vote. But once you're in and you get elected, you know, that's when it's like, you know, barren, right? You need to find the support and the mentorship to navigate the tricky waters that you're going to face, and know that you're going to make mistakes and know that that's okay, and how to handle it and how to pick yourself up and brush yourself off. So I would say that's some of the supports that are critical, in addition to all, you know, some of the fabulous programs that are out there. At Latinas Represent, my organization's part of this effort. You know, we're really trying to lift up the void of Latina leadership in the country writ large, but also, you know, have the conversations about what it means to run for office, provide a network and a hub for resources that women can get connected to and Latinas can get connected to. So that, whether the support is with someone in your community or someone across the country, just having that experience puts you almost in a little bit of a different club where you can really share some of the struggles that you face and have sort of a sounding board and some thought partnership on this process.
Nice. So you both mentioned something about, you know, the things that nobody tells you, you know. Can you talk a little bit more about the realities of the political world, those things that nobody mentions to you? Because it can seem very romantic. Oh, I'm going to run for office and I'm going to have all this power. I'm going to be, you know, in the in circles. But what are some of those realities that people should have in mind if they are thinking of running for office or being elected officials?
I think there's two portions, right? There's things that nobody tells you why you're running for office. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. You're going to be going door to door. I got elected my election was a winter election. It was cold. It was, you know, uncomfortable. But you're also going to figure out that there are going to be people that are with you that will do it all with you. So you're not going to be alone. So people don't tell you, you know, that you're not going to be isolated. You're going to have a team of people. I think people don't tell you that how you run for office will be different because you are Latina. So your perspective is different, and that is okay. I think oftentimes you hire political consultants that want to force you into this, oh, well, this is how everybody else does it. Well, everybody else is male and white in many cases. So you have a voice within your campaign to say, I want to do this a little differently because I want to talk to my people differently. So you should be able to do that. After you get into office, you realize that, you know, you're coming in at oftentimes at the entry level. So you have to develop relationships. And for me, it meant developing relationships in some cases with the Republican council members, developing relationships with members outside of Queens, developing relationships with people that aren't necessarily progressive like me, but just so that they would better understand the process. And, you know, some people will look at they see me now and they're like, oh, she's the finance chair. But it was a lot of conversations and a lot of relationship building that helped me get to where I am. So there's a lot of frustration because you come in as a candidate, I'm going to change the world. And then you get here and you're like, oh my God, this is molasses. And then you figure out I got to do like little victories, small victories, one at a time. And then they all add up. But so often when people get elected, they're often thinking about their re-election. So you also have this, like, this is the one job where you're going to have to go back and do this again in 2 or 4 years. And you have that pressure looming on you. So, you know, those are the things that I think people don't necessarily see when you talk about politics.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, is that your experience as well?
My role was a little bit different. I was a Democratic State Committee member, so I wasn't a legislator. So I didn't create, you know, laws or policies, but I was part of the political party and made policy decisions on behalf of the Democratic Party in New York State. So it was a little bit of a different playing field, but so there was less interaction. But a lot of the same things that Julissa said I experienced. I did run with the idea of that I'm young, I'm Latina, I have a very authentic voice, I represent immigrants, I represent a community that's struggling, and I'm going to change the game, and I'm going to change the way politics is done. And that is really challenging. It is, you come into a system that's completely well-oiled, completely well set up, and positions people of power in a way that allows them to stay there, right? Like Julissa said, people are always thinking about their next election. So, you know, to come in as a newbie without sort of have done the hard work or built those tough relationships or worked across the aisle, I think is really challenging and quite naive. So it is about those small victories. It is about the relationship building. And it's around understanding where you can make change and understanding that it's going to take some time. And I think it's really about thinking about pipeline and the next folks that are going to be part of this next political future, right? So, you know, as people rise in politics, I see a lot of, particularly around the Latino leaders, that they're looking for the next generation. They're looking for those people to fill the district leader positions, the state committee positions that I had. And ideally we'll be in positions to groom them and support them and mentor them and bring them up. So then we're changing the makeup of the political machine. It's not sort of the old white men in power that continue to keep them in power, but as we build and build and build, it'll become stronger. But that takes years and years and years and years, and you know, there has to be sort of a reality check about how quickly that can happen. But I think even in the time since I ran, I was in the position for 4 years. I ran for re-election and got it, but I actually decided that I was going to pursue nonprofit work rather than continue the political route. But I stayed really involved in the community, and I continue to support candidates I'm really excited about. I continue to help door knock. I continue to do the work because I want to make sure that we're supporting the next generation of leaders that are going to contribute to the next political future and start seeing those seeds of change flourish. But it takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to also add that one of the interesting things is that after you get Latinos elected, Latinos and Latinas elected, then it kind of awakens the community, and then the community feels like, oh, we can run against them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you know, we create this vacuum where I wish that as Latinos we could look at opportunities where we don't just have to represent Latinos, we can also represent other communities, because other communities have represented us for a long time. So to be able to have that strength and understand that we represent a people, not just the Latinos, because I find now that the Latinos run against the Latinos, and it's like, that doesn't help us either. We have to kind of expand and grow and be bigger than just running against each other.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I want to go back a little bit to Jessica. And you both have amazing experience in community organizing besides the political world. But in your case, Jessica, you actually decided to go back after being in politics, to go back into community organizing. So why did you decide to do that? And do you feel that one person can be more powerful advocating from one side of the aisle versus the other? Is that why you switched, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, like some of the challenges we mentioned earlier about Latinas encouraging Latinas to run for office. I too wanted to have a family, and I didn't actually think I could do both politics and a family. And Julissa proves us wrong, and so many women in office and Latinas in office do prove us wrong. But at the time, I felt too that my skill set and the leadership and the experiences I had would be best served focusing on one area of work. So I guess the other challenge I want to flag too is that when you're an elected official, you have to become sort of a generalist, right? Because as Julissa mentioned, you represent a community. You don't just represent the Latino community in your district. You represent all the people in the district. So you're often dealing with everything from street lights to the schools to the healthcare system to different issues in the community that come up, community centers, the post office. I mean, there's so many services that are needed and provided that you have a voice in and that you have some authority over. So you become a little bit more of a generalist, and I was really interested in being more focused in my advocacy. So my commitments are around Latina women, LGBTQ individuals, immigrants, and those who are low income. So it was a little bit more focused and allowed me to really delve deep into those areas and build my expertise. So I was really thrilled when I was able to join the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health, because while we're very focused, we have a very intersectional framework. So it allows me to work very intersectionally, but the focus is about bringing the voices of the community to create change. So now I'm on a different end and working with other community members to elevate their voices, to speak truth to power, to show up in the offices of elected officials, to tell their stories, to fight for change. So I've kind of seen it on both ends. I've seen what it's like to work with an elected official. I used to work with Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. I was an elected official, and then now I work with advocates on the ground. So I think I provide a good sense of experience, perspective, and expertise to serve a very deeper purpose. And not to say one is better than the other, but for me, that's how I felt my skills would be best utilized and sort of drilled down and honed in a way. But never say never about politics. I actually still have my political committee still open, and I file every single year that I've not raised any money. So for some reason I haven't closed that campaign committee down. But I'm very passionate about seeing and supporting other leaders run for office. And like I said, Julissa is such an inspiration to me, and all her work that she's done in the city council has really been revolutionary. And watching that on the local level, on the state level, and on the national level with many candidates has just been really exciting.
Wow, and I think it just it speaks so much of the kind of person that you are. I'm excited to know, Jessica, that you still have it in the back of your head back there, that you might want to run again. We definitely need leadership like yours out there. So as what I can gather is you two have very specific skills, very specific talents that you bring to the table. How do you think we can start identifying people who have those kind of leadership skills that are required to be in office, and you know, and not only that, but also like building them their skills, you know, like building that pipeline that will get them into the world of politics.
I think in this body, in the council, what's so special here is that everyone has a different background. We have teachers, we have someone who was a former token booth clerk, so she used to sell the Metro card. We have lawyers, less lawyers than one would think, because a lot of people think you have to be an attorney to run for office. We have mothers, we have members of the LGBT community. There's just so much diversity that I think it's a misnomer that people have to be either have some type of legislative background or experience. Clearly, any experience that you have working or understanding, anyone that's going to run for office should know the job that they're running for. So that's the first thing. You should understand what your responsibilities are, what your oversight is over, because your constituents deserve that you know what you're getting yourself, what you're running for office for. However, I don't think that there's like this perfect resume that you have to have before running for office. I think every Latina with passion and conviction and that has organized or mobilized any type of campaign, be it a PTA meeting or a meeting about an issue in your community of, you know, you want to put up a traffic light. If you have the power of, you know, organizing people and bringing like-minded people together, then you have the potential of being an incredible candidate.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I remember a young woman was talking to me, and she was telling me that, you know, she got a government degree, and then she was working on the Hill, and then she has plans to go to law school and grad school, and then because she wanted to run for office. And I said, you know, well, where do you live? And she didn't live in D.C. I said, you know what you should do to run for office? You should go back to your community and get involved. You should talk to the community members. You should volunteer. You should volunteer in a campaign, work for a candidate, do community cleanups, you know, participate in community meetings, show up at the police precinct community councils, the community board meetings. That's the way you build that you know, so-called resume, right? That's the way, because what's important is that people who are representing us authentically understand the community, understand the folks and their needs, and can really bring that voice to whatever elected role it is. So I completely agree. You don't need a perfect resume for this. You actually just need to be someone who's accessible and who's connected to the ground. And that's why I think sometimes, you know, community organizers are such great leaders, because they've hit the pavement. They've heard from so many diverse voices and perspectives. And I think there's an awesome responsibility to carry those voices and those concerns to the powers that be, to the political process, and ensure that those folks continue to be engaged in supporting the candidates that are running, and then the elected officials that are in place, and that there's a continual dialogue between the community and the electeds, so that they stay grounded in the needs and the very authentic needs of the community.
I apologize because I got a sudden attack of coughing. That wasn't in the script. But I want to continue on that same line, Jessica. If you can talk a little bit about, in terms of building the pipeline and building community organizers. You've been doing that for years now with the Latina Institute, and you know, you really have mastered the art of intersectionality. Can you talk to us a little bit about the kind of work that you do there, and what people can find when they get involved in the organization?
Great. Yeah, the National Latina Institute Institute for Reproductive Health is a national organization that's dedicated to advancing the human right to reproductive health, dignity, and justice. And we do that in a couple ways. We elevate Latina leaders. We change the cultural narrative around our work. We organize our families and communities, and we catalyze policy change. So doing that work, we have, our office in Washington, D.C., where we do a lot of the policy work. But we have offices throughout the country, particularly in New York, Virginia, Florida, and Texas, where we're on the ground doing the day-in-day organizing, day in and day out, ensuring that we're hearing the voices of community members and their needs. And the intersectional frame that we take on is one that's called reproductive justice. And what that means is that we're not just fighting for someone's legal right to health care or legal right to an abortion or legal right to sex education, but around thinking about all the factors that influence a person's life to be able to thrive in this country. So, for example, we look at immigration, we look at LGBTQ identity, we look at poverty, we look at ability or disability. We take into account all those factors to advocate for policies that holistically benefit the person, the individual, their family, and their community. So, for example, we're fighting around ensuring that there's an immigration policy that meets the needs of women, and understanding that immigrant women are the backbones of their families and their communities. They're the one navigating complicated patchwork of healthcare systems and education. And we need to ensure that there are policies that reflect and allow for support for those needs. So we have a very intersectional framework, and it allows us to meet communities where they're at and advocate for the policies that benefit them. So it's a very nuanced framework, but it actually is rooted in human rights and social justice. So it really embodies the lived experiences of the women that we work with day in and day out. And those voices are essential to advocating for policies that authentically benefit their communities and allow them to thrive.
I have had the opportunity to collaborate with you, and so I know firsthand the amazing work that you do every day, Jessica. I'm so proud of the Latina Institute, and I appreciate that you call me every now and then. Hey, let's do this, and so I want you to keep counting on that with me. Now I'm gonna turn to Julissa. Julissa, when Speaker Vibredo first got elected, you were appointed as the first woman and the first person of color to chair the City Council's Committee on Finance in New York, among other duties, But what would you recommend for somebody who wants to go for the big guns, the people who want to run for a higher office or to take on a responsibility, like the one you have of the largest budget in the country? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, with all fairness, it has more to do with relationship building and showing that when you give your word and your commitment, tiene peso, it means something, and that is what will help you kind of go up those steps. Oftentimes you'll see, oh, there's so much politics, and you have to be strategic. For me, my experience was that my relationship building and my examples of, if I give you my word on legislation, I walked the projects till the very end until we saw that we would vote on it. And working with the speaker in that capacity helped me be the one that she considered and made a decision to put into that position. Understanding that I was also a symbol for her, where she wanted to send a clear message that not only was she making history, but the people around her, she was going to ensure that they also made history. So it's about identifying good partners, and I think this, and Jessica knows this in the nonprofit world, as you just mentioned, Jessica will grab the phone and say, hey, I want to work with you on this project. And those are relationships that you're building and networks. It's the same thing in politics when you come into the actual body. You'll find that you have to develop relationships with people. You have to work on legislative projects together. And you have to kind of keep your word, keep your commitments. And even when there are battles that are tough, sometimes that's when you really are able to show your character even more. Because in the easy battles, everybody's in. But it's in the tough ones. It's in the battles that, Jessica and all of our nonprofit organizations are fighting every day. That's when you really get to see the muster of what makes people. So for me, it was obviously an incredible opportunity and a blessing for Melissa to consider me. But I also knew that I was something that I deserved, where I think oftentimes as Latinas, we tend to say, ay, pero can I do it? I don't have I don't have that background. I said, absolutely, give me the challenge, give me great staff, and we'll make it happen. Like, let's just get into it. And I think it's about knowing, and people feel that when they know that you have the confidence that even though my experience or my background wasn't in finance, I wasn't, a Wall Streeter, but I knew that my experience was about my people, and the problems that we had in my district required money, so therefore I needed to be at that table.
Wonderful, wonderful. So why are there not more Latinas at the table? We talked in the beginning about the fact that Latinas are 1 or 2% of elected officials across the board. Why is that? What do you attribute that we're not at the table so much? Is it lack of aspirations? Is it a product of the environment, or what is your opinion?
I think it's a mixture of things. I don't think there's one reason, because if there was one reason, then we would all be looking to solve it. I think it's, for some women, it's timing. For other women, it's that they don't see enough of us. So if you don't have a mentor, enough of us out there, then they don't think it possible. I think it's to not recognize that there are groups out there that really don't want us to be in these positions. And it's hard to admit, and sometimes it's our own men, our own Latino men, that are not necessarily supportive of us in that way. I think it's multiple issues. So I don't think there's like one clear answer as to why there aren't more women. All we can do is do these amazing things that you're doing, is just attack it from different approaches and start breaking down those barriers.
Right, right.
And to flip the narrative a little, as I mentioned, I feel like there's so much leadership and really inspirational leadership in the face of tremendous systemic barriers. It's just harnessing that leadership, right? And seeing themselves as something bigger than they are, and encouraging that and supporting that and being there for them. And the support is so critical. The two things I want to flag is that Latinas are actually going and graduating college at higher rates than our Latino counterparts. And women in general actually register and turn out to vote in greater numbers than their male counterparts, and the same things for Latinas. So we are natural born leaders. We are natural born leaders in the community. We're engaged in civic participation and political participation. It's about harnessing that power and that ingrained and innate leadership to see themselves in the opportunity to run for higher office. And then we face some of the challenges that Julissa mentioned. I think, like she said, money is such a big one, right? There's so much cultural anxiety around money that it's a really hard one to tackle. But there are such tremendous organizations that focus on building Latina power and Latina leaders and Latina candidates that we can learn that skill. It's about now I say we have to call upon ourselves to actually make those encouragement and those asks, right? I look at the leadership of our activists that are on the ground. I'm like, I see an elected official in this woman. I could see that. And how do we harness it, or even just kind of plant the seed? Have you ever thought about, city council? Have you ever thought about county commission? Have you ever thought about, a state rep, being a state rep? So it's about having more and more of these conversations and these dialogues that allow us to plant more of those seeds. And I have to thank the Latinas Represent project, because that's what they're having these conversations across the country, and they're targeting young women, and they're targeting community leaders, and they're targeting those who are in office to share their stories and struggles and advice, so that the dream can see more of a reality, as they learn more and more. So to move to an asset model, I just see tremendous potential in our community, and I already see the potential leadership in our community.
Beautiful. And Jessica, you kind of like moved into my next question, which was gonna be, how do we harness all of that amazing energy? Because on the one side, I see reports of, oh, Latinos are not really engaged in politics, but then I see, like you said, all of these amazing women doing great things out there. So, and you kind of touched on that, but I want to engage also Julissa in this part of the conversation. How do we take all of that energy and all of those people who have amazing skills out there, and kind of make them, convince them that they need to be in this world, so they need to get involved in politics?
I think, everything that Jessica said was right on point. We have to recognize and value what we do. We do it so easy in some cases, or with so much passion, that we think, how do we translate all this into politics? And what we fail to recognize is, politics is a science, and it's in everyday life. If you talk to a young person, who do they need to talk to in their family to get money? They know exactly who to go to. That's politics.
Yeah.
He knows exactly how he has to go. When they need permission for something, where do you go? That's all politics. So there's so much politics in our everyday life, that I think, which is really frustrating for me, because when I go door to door, they're like, "Hi, I don't like politics. I want to get involved." It's like, wait a minute, there's politics in everything. So it's about harnessing this potential, but also being able to educate people. 60,000 political positions that people can run for across this country. And I don't think we need to do a better job, and I challenge even myself, at explaining how many positions people can run for. How much does it pay? Like, we also don't want to have a conversation about salary, if it doesn't pay in your area, how else can a community support you while you run for office? And I think once we start taking down those anxieties, we'll see more people running for office when they see, oh, I could totally do this. In some cases, you can have a second job and have a municipal position. In other cases, your full-time job can be a political position because it pays you that much. We need to have a real conversation about salary, potential, growth. Look at it like a real job, and not just as an opportunity to just change policy, but it really is a career.
Very true, very true. And so I know that we now have to start wrapping up. We're running a little bit out of time, but I don't want to leave without having your last word. What would you say to a Latina who's watching out there, who might be thinking or might have some kind of aspiration, but who doesn't know where to start? So that's part one of the question. The second part is, I wanted to share, where can people contact you? Where can people find out more about what you're doing? So let's start with Jessica.
So my last piece of advice is to volunteer, to hit the ground, to get involved, to meet other Latinas, other women. There's so much opportunity to find ways to get involved that don't require, volunteering for a campaign necessarily, but just doing really important community work. Join the PTA, run for school board. There's so many opportunities. And the work I do, we do community meetings with Latinas to have to create safe space to have conversations about sexual and reproductive health. learn about those things, right? We have to break down the taboos around our own health, our own wellness, so that we can be healthy, we can thrive, and we could be our best leaders in the communities. Because if we're not healthy, then we're not able to, be the leaders in our families and our communities. So please take care of yourself, get involved, and for more information, please join our Facebook page or our Twitter feed. It's Facebook Latina Institute, or NLIRH, and then our Twitter feed is NLIRH as well, and our website is latinainstitute.org. So learn more, and I encourage everyone to get involved. And I also want to flag the Latinas Represent project at the Political Parity Project. I think it's latinasrepresent.org. So please look those up and get involved.
Thank you, Jessica. And Julissa?
Again, she and I are from the same neighborhood and almost the same, I think, batch of women. So it's a lot of what Jessica just said, but it's about volunteering. Find a campaign. Volunteer in a campaign. There's nothing like that experience of eating pizza every day because it's the cheapest food you can find, coming in after door to door, stuffing envelopes, getting mailers ready to go out. I think it's a great experience. So find a candidate that you believe in and just kind of see what a campaign for you might look like. Volunteer in something that you love. At the end of the day, politics has a lot to do with convictions and your principles as to what you want to bring into politics. So being able to hone that in, I think, is important. But if there was one thing I would say, volunteering on a campaign and also getting involved in your neighborhood and your community or the district that you want to run in is far more important than trying to get, something from the outside. That is the first step. And then talk to your family. Let them know that you're about to embark on this and that you want their support. Sometimes the first people you have to convince, your first voters, are your own family. So do that first. They're going to be the best volunteers in your campaign. And again, I could be found on Twitter at Julissa Ferreras, and Facebook Council Member Julissa Ferreras, and anyone could email me. It would be my pleasure to engage and help any Latina run for office.
Beautiful. And I think you guys who are watching have seen a prime example of what it's like, to have Latinas in leadership. These women are rocking the boat out there. They're changing the way that politics are done. And like I said, you might have those same aspirations or those same skills, and so just just jump into it, and if that is what you are aspiring to do. There's so many resources out there. I urge you to follow them. I urge you to also follow Political Parity, our partner in these Hangouts. And I see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Julissa and Jessica, for being here today. I see you next week. Poderosas.